Good morning. Thanks for coming out, everyone. Welcome to the Wallace Lecture. This lecture focuses on the improvement of educational practice in American primary and secondary schools. Special emphasis is given to topics that relate to the improvement of educational services for students from low-income communities. One of the really fun things you get to do when you're president of AERA, along with your program committee, I want to recognize Catherine DiMartino and Lorena Yosa. Oh my God, and Huria Jabbar. Good Lord, sorry, Huria. We get to choose the distinguished lecturers, and as we were considering who we would want to elevate some of the themes of the conference, but also the call for this lectureship, no one came to mind as strongly, as sharply as William Penwell. So I get to introduce him. William R. Penwell is the Distinguished Professor of Learning Sciences and Human Development in the Institute of Cognitive Science and School of Education at the University of Colorado Boulder. He designs and studies curriculum materials, assessments, and professional learning experiences for teachers in STEM education, primarily in science. He also investigates how contemplative, I can never say that word, Bill, contemplative, thank you for the coaching, practices and critical inquiry can support educators in cultivating more compassionate learning environments in schools. A third line of his research focuses on how long-term research practice partnerships can be organized to address systemic inequities in education systems linked to race, gender, and sexual diversity and language. In each of his projects, Penwell works in partnership with educators and education leaders to explore how to attenuate inequities in school systems by first creating equitable classroom cultures that attend to student experience, 2, testing strategies to address epistemic injustices in whose knowledge is elicited and valued, and 3, connecting teaching to the interests, experiences, and identities of learners, particularly those to whom our society owes an education debt. He uses a wide range of research methods, including one Penwell and colleagues developed called design-based implementation research, to test what they co-design. Penwell is the author of 2 books on research practice partnerships, Creating Research Practice Partnerships in Education, and Connecting Research and Practice for Educational Improvement, and a co-edited book on improvement research, the Foundational Handbook on Improvement Research in Education. He is also a co-author on a book to be released by John Wiley & Sons in late April called Creating Compassionate Change in School Communities, Leading Together to Address Everyday Suffering in Schools. We are so happy and honored to welcome Bill Penwell.
Thank you, Janelle, for that warm and generous introduction, and for you all for welcoming me here. I'm so grateful to be here. I'm grateful to Janelle and the program committee for inviting me. And let's give it up for Janelle, who's been such an amazing AERA president. So I am pleased to be here with you today and grateful for the opportunity to speak with you about a forward-looking vision of what education could be. And I realize that many of us right now are in quite a different space. And I want to acknowledge the grief, the anger, and the pain that many of us have experienced and are experienced, and has been caused by the Trump administration's actions of the past few months. I'd like to pause just to acknowledge whatever is arising for you as I name the time that we're in. It's important for us to take into that we are here together in this space. So I'm going to be quiet for just a few seconds. And for just this hour, I want to invite you into a different space, a space of possibility and hope, a space where we might imagine together not only a different educational system, but a world in which we as scholars are contributing to building such a system in different ways than many of us have in the past. I realize I can't ask you to do that, though, without first giving us a chance to do a little reset for a moment. For that, I'm going to call on the words and invitation of the Reverend Fred Rogers. When he accepted a Lifetime Achievement Award in 1996 for his work in children's television. And we're going to do the activity that he did with his audience. He said, "All of us have special ones who have loved us into being. Would you just take, along with me, 10 seconds to think of the people who've helped you become who you are? Those who have cared about you and wanted what was best for you in life." I'll count the time. 10 seconds. And then Fred said, and I say to you, whoever you've been thinking about, how pleased they must be to know the difference that you feel they've made. And I say to you, think too of how proud they would be of you now. Here's a short outline of where I want to go with you today. I'm going to talk a little bit about what I mean by education for flourishing. I'll describe 3 different initiatives that are working to achieve that or cultivate it. I'll describe the role that partnerships play and have played in supporting these initiatives. And I'll talk about the present moment we're in and what we might do to cultivate more initiatives like these. Before I begin, I want to offer gratitude for groups of people who have nurtured my heart and intellect and whose ideas and care have shaped what I offer today. Doing so will hopefully give you a sense of where I'm coming from, as well as the people to whom I hold myself to account. None of us stands on our own, and I owe much gratitude to my teachers and colleagues in my life, as well as to the different theoretical, methodological, and contemplative traditions that my own work rests on going back generations. I'm a science educator who's grateful to colleagues, especially most recently that I served on a National Academy's Consensus Committee on Equity in Pre-K through STEM education, 12 STEM education, who helped push me to embrace that a key purpose of STEM education should be to cultivate the futures that attend to and support both ecological and human well-being. I'm a learning scientist who's grateful to my learning sciences colleagues, particularly those who are here in the audience from CU Boulder, who have helped me see the many ways that we can partner with educators, students, families, communities. I'm a scholar who blends contemplative practice, inquiry, and action, and I've been especially grateful to be able to learn alongside educators and colleagues with similar orientations, whose work I've been given permission to share today. Other identities that shape how I think and move in the world are meditation student and teacher, community leader, advisor, mentor, partner, Baba or father, and friend. So flourishing. Philosophers of education have long debated the purpose of education, purposes that have shaped the policies, programs, and infrastructures of our schools today. And for the past several years, a number of educators, communities, researchers have been coming together to imagine and create alternative practices and infrastructures grounded in a different sense from what is today and what is possible. The seeds of this vision are rooted in a growing evidence base related to the social and cultural nature of human development and learning, international and cross-sector efforts to reimagine policies that can better support our collective well-being, and by efforts to redesign learning environments and create new ones that are the spaces of healing and civic learning. They're also drawing on traditions of freedom dreaming, testimonial, and deep contemplative practice. They're asking, what would it look like for us to learn and live together in just and joyful ways, in a way that is sustainable on this planet? These efforts point us toward a different purpose for education, one rooted in collaboration, love, and the belief that our differences are a strength. One word that captures that purpose behind these seeds is flourishing. Flourishing is a concept with deep roots in Greek philosophy as well as contemporary developmental science. Flourishing in these traditions often focuses on the idea that education should focus on designing spaces and activities that allow for young people to develop their own individual potential in ways that are meaningful, ethical, and joyful. Here, the ethical dimension of flourishing emphasizes the value of supporting others' flourishing and living with integrity, even in challenging times. In fact, there are many different conceptions of flourishing that we can and should draw on in imagining a new kind of educational system. As a science educator, I think immediately of the ways that flourishing in a population of organisms refers to the ability to grow, reproduce, and contribute to ecosystems in ways that foster resilience. As a cultural psychologist, I turn immediately to thinking about how practices of flourishing can vary in ways that allow different human communities to thrive and be sustained, and that they've done so for generations. I also think about how communities organize spaces alongside and outside mainstream institutions to support their thriving. And as someone who organizes research practice partnerships, I think about the ways that commitments to reciprocity, generosity, and honoring the dignity of participants in research are attributes of interaction that are key to their success. Flourishing is not something an individual can do alone. Flourishing is social and contingent. Flourishing as we live and experience it in daily life is complex, dynamic, and relational. It depends on the circumstances in which we find ourselves, circumstances that are shaped by history and the decisions of others. Each of us depends on a vast network of others and on the planet for our very survival and thriving. We need relationships and institutions that can support us to thrive. Our flourishing depends on the non-human, natural kinds that make up our world. So we need to, as Robin Wall Kimmerer puts it, to know the ways of the ones who care for us so that we can take care of them, to give thanks for what we have been given, and to give a gift in reciprocity for what we have taken. Kimmerer's words point to the central importance of care in supporting flourishing. One name for this kind of care that is needed comes from the Buddhist tradition, a Pali and Sanskrit word, anukampa. It signifies a deep motivation to alleviate the suffering of others and to promote their well-being. Tibetan Buddhist scholar and collaborator Thupten Jempa says that this term evokes the image of a heart that trembles or vibrates with sensitivity and aliveness, a heart moved by caring. In Anukampa, the heart is moved to witness suffering and also to action with the goal of bringing about a better future for all of us. Anukampa captures two aspects of caring activity, namely the inner movement of the heart in response to suffering that leads to an aspiration to help, followed by skillful action to relieve suffering. It is a core part of my spiritual practice within an American convert Theravada Buddhist tradition to develop and cultivate Anukampa. I can say it's a challenging, ongoing, and organizing principle of my life. The different forms of Anukampa I will share today have also different lineages from the convert lineage that I'm part of. They draw on ideas about care and education from Black, Chicana, indigenous scholars to name qualities that are required for flourishing within our inequitable society. Skillful Anukampa in education today requires that educators and leaders consider the wider social and political contexts of children's lives when building relationships with them. It needs to encompass support for replenishing the advocates and educators and counselors' own physical and material resources and well-being. It needs to encompass joy, awe, and appreciation for our deep connections to traditions and to each other. It will require the deepest wisdom traditions and learning from other species, from the lands and the waters. These traditions challenge us and invite us to grow in our understanding of systems, the forms and causes of suffering they generate, and to witness and lift up the wide variety of skillful ways that people with different life experiences can respond to suffering with care. Supporting flourishing means that we have to center history, memory, and the work of repair. As Angela Booker and Shelley Goldman remind us, for many students and families, their relationship to school and to academic subjects isn't just about learning. It's a social, cultural, and historical problem that needs healing. A lot of young people and their families have deep, often painful histories with schools. Histories marked by exclusion, displacement, forced assimilation, and erasure. If we ignore that, we ignore the role history plays in shaping our present and in shaping what's possible for the future. If we want to repair these relationships, we need practices that draw from our deepest sources of wisdom. We'll need to value relationships as essential to our shared well-being and be willing to build bridges across difference and across pain. We also need the skill to rethink and reshape how our institutions relate to communities. And through all of that, we have to remember that healing can start in small moments, moments of connection that feed us and help us learn what it means to truly flourish. Today, I'm going to take up two key aspects of building systems for flourishing: the design of initiatives for flourishing and how to build and study them in partnership with youth, families, and educators. I'm choosing to focus on this first aspect, initiatives, because as a learning scientist, I feel well prepared to speak about what's involved in embodying and testing conjectures about learning in the design of spaces, activities, and initiatives. Focusing on partnerships because through my scholarship and practice, I've developed a strong sense of how the often invisible relational work that takes place among partners matters for their success. I recognize that building an education system focused on flourishing will require cross-sector political and policy changes, as well as cultural shifts in what we value in education. And at the same time, I want to maintain that seeing some existence proofs for initiatives and partnerships can be an important resource for policy design, especially when the partnerships are engaged in work to transform infrastructures. I'm going to share examples of initiatives in which young people and educators together are working to build relationships that can support flourishing. They are all projects from the Renee Crown Wellness Institute at the University of Colorado Boulder, where I am a faculty fellow. The Crown Institute is a research and practice center dedicated to creating a world where every young person thrives by promoting the wellness of young people and the systems and adults who support them. The examples I'll share come from each of the three main areas of work. I'll focus on each one builds relationships of care, such as, and just as importantly, how they take on the work of repairing or reworking relationships among people, subject matter, and institutions in the service of human flourishing. And after I describe these, I'll share how we built interdisciplinary partnerships and organizations to support and sustain that work. At the Crown Institute, our work is organized around these three areas, and they are based on who we're partnered with. And these are the core values here on this slide. And they include trust, integrity, fierce compassion, dignity, and always with heart. So the first initiative is the Lyropeutics Initiative. And this team is exploring how learning spaces rooted in hip-hop education and critical literacies can help young people in schools with large Black, Indigenous, and people of color populations to share wellness stories that come from their own cultural communities. And this is directed by my colleague Kalonji Nzinga here who's at the University of Colorado Boulder, and created by this design team of faculty, graduate students, teachers, and local community artists. Oops. The Lyropeutics team runs rap labs in 2 high schools in a large Colorado district which are open to all young people. Each lab is fully equipped with a professional-grade studio where students produce tracks, create music for local radio, and record podcasts. But more than just a studio, the Rap Lab is a youth-centered space inside the school. Look at these walls. They're covered in art and graffiti made by the students themselves, and the space has a strong, welcoming vibe. Some students come in for class credit, and others come just for community, whether that means dropping in for a bit or staying for hours. It's a place full of energy and connection where students can feel joy and safety, explore rap lyricism, learn about music production, or simply express themselves. It's a dynamic learning environment where different kinds of learning happen all the time for individuals and for groups. Hip hop is at the heart of it all. Not just a way to connect school to students' lives, but the actual material of a multi-week curriculum that dives into art, rhyme, and production. In this space, hip-hop culture and music aren't just a hook, it's the subject itself, a legitimate and powerful space of learning. For some students, having the chance to bring themselves into the classroom has helped them grow in their intellectual identity and even begin to repair important relationships. Kalanji told me about a student in the hip-hop class, let's call him Kareem. And one day, Kareem brought in a beat his father had produced. His dad's a musician, an artist, and an MC. Kareem was so excited to lay down his own lyrics on top of his father's beat. He shared a rough version with the group during one of the Rat Lab's crit sessions where students listen closely to each other's work and offer feedback, some encouragement, some suggestions to take it further. And as staff watched the exchange, it was clear Kareem felt seen and affirmed by how seriously his peers engaged with his music. Later, he shared that their feedback actually helped him understand more about his relationship with his father. Making and sharing that song wasn't just an assignment. It became a way for him to connect and reconnect with his dad through their shared love of hip hop. Since its opening more than 5 years ago, the Rap Lab has been a space of healing and wellness for many young people. Nzinga shares the story of one student, we'll call her Valentina, who had just arrived from Venezuela and joined the school for about 11 weeks into the semester. By then, the Rap Lab already had a strong culture, and students in the 4-credit classes had been working with the curriculum for a while. Even so, Valentina found her way into the lab. With help from a district translator and a Spanish-speaking staff member, she was able to communicate that she had experience in rap. She picked up a mic, worked with the translator and her classmates to find a beat, and delivered a powerful lyrical performance in Spanish to the class. Her classmates were amazed by her rhythm, her confidence, and the emotion that she brought to the mic. It was a moment of deep self-expression, sharing her joy as an immigrant, and also a moment of recognition. The program team invited her to perform at the end of the year showcase for families and the school community, and her brother and other relatives were able to come. And like many others in the room, they were deeply moved by her performance. That moment gave Valentina a public and shared sense of belonging. And at the same time, not all of the wellness practices in the Rap Lab are widely shared with everyone in the space. Some healing is held quietly within the space, as it is in many communities. This quiet holding is something sacred. It is not about exclusion. It is about holding knowledge within relationships of care and confidentiality in ways that honor, too, what is precious about cultivating wellness within spaces where it is hard for many students, because of the identities they hold within an intersecting systems of power, to allow themselves to be vulnerable within this institution where one does not feel seen or heard. The Rap Labs are also more than regular classrooms, as these stories show. Nzinga calls them fugitive wellness spaces, places of imagination and creativity that sit outside the usual structures of surveillance in schools. They are spaces where young people can express themselves in ways that are often stigmatized or overlooked in traditional school settings. Drawing on ideas of Black fugitivity, Nzinga and colleagues describe the Rap Lab as a place where wellness practices can flourish in ways that aren't usually possible in school. Importantly, it's at school, inside the school, yes, but also lives partly in the space that is legit but free. In that space, students build real connections with each other and with teacher advocates and begin to imagine and practice different ways of being in community. Putting hip hop at the center of the Rap Lab is a powerful form of repair. It helps students rebuild their relationships with schools, with learning, by making what's often dismissed and devalued the core of the curriculum, something that matters and has meaning. Other Crown Institute programs extend the support to supporting families and youth within them in developing a sense of belonging in schools and in creating strong relationships of trust between schools and families. The Belonging and Trust Initiative started in 2019 and led by Adriana Alvarez and Leah Peña-Teeters, encourages Latina families and public school educators with the aim of developing and enhancing systems and programs that cultivate belonging and trust in schools for Latina students and their families and communities in 2 different districts in Colorado. A core practice of this program, working with both elementary and high school students and their families, is testimonio. Testimonio centers first-person stories as a way to connect individual experiences to larger collective ones. It affirms and uplifts experiences that are often silenced or unseen, especially in schools. In the Belonging and Trust Project, testimonio is also used to build connection, foster solidarity, and push for changes in schools that reflect the wisdom of those furthest from power. It is a heart-centered practice, creating space for young people to share personal, often difficult stories and be met with real care. It makes students' voices, hopes, and visions more visible in the school culture. And as Teeters and colleagues write, multimodal testimonio can be a practice to identify and heal distrust and ignite imagination, cultivate authentic individual and institutional care, and support students' well-being. As I'll elaborate later, these testimonials were oriented towards transformative ends, to advocate for schools where these students and their families might feel as though their stories mattered. At one elementary school, Adriana Alvarez and the Crown Institute partnered with teachers to bring multimodal testimonio into a 5th grade capstone project. The goal was to give students a way to reflect on their learning journey and share their hopes for the future as they prepare to move on to middle school. The Belonging and Trust team worked with educators to adapt the project by offering 4 creative options. Students could make maps of places that were meaningful to them or to their families. They could create visual timelines of important life events, conduct interviews with family members, and bring in artifacts that represent who they are. These were different ways, all different ways to share their stories, center their identities, and speak from the heart, creating powerful visual testimonios that showed the richness of their lives, their connections to place, to family, and to family histories that intersect with community stories of both resilience and celebration. The following year, the team worked with a small group of 6th graders from the initial part of the study to participate in a bookmaking workshop. In these workshops, students were invited to consider what message they thought would inspire a children's book to convey the message. One of the students, I'll call her Daniela, said that a message she would like to share was that younger students should know they belong here and that everyone has a right. A significant event in Daniela's life was a celebration of her sister's quinceañera. And so she decided to write a book that described this traditional celebration and combined her own wishes in a book entitled 15 Wishes for My Quinceañera. Examples of her book included, I wish that Latino children are always welcome in America and that they feel like they belong. I wish that my family always has a roof to live under and that they stay healthy, and that I dream that everyone has a right to vote, even if you weren't born here. At the high school, Leah Teeters' team that was also part of this project, but the focus was on exploring students' experience of trust and distrust in schools. Students were invited to articulate a vision of schools de confianza, of trust, and the actions requisite to enact that vision. It involved 18 high school students, ages 15 to 17, who identified as Latine. 5 of the participants were also involved in co-designing the project and co-facilitating it. The project started with students creating self-portraits that contain no human images and then discussing their own relationship to the concept of confianza or trust. They shared that confianza was where they could be themselves, where there was no judgment. The group described it as a clean smell and sounding like laughter, music, and good conversation. Students took pictures of light, sports team, writing, and classrooms arranged in circles, and students engaged in discussions. Once trust was built in the group, students began sharing stories of desconfianza, or distrust. They talked about not fitting in, feeling unheard, and being the only Latino student in advanced classes. Some took photos to express these feelings, like grammar corrections or melting snow on dead grass. Their testimonials revealed shared themes: feeling judged, left out, or like they didn't belong. Teachers didn't always believe in them, but through these stories, students realized they weren't alone. They found connection and solidarity. By putting their experiences into a broader social and political context, students could begin to see the harm they faced as something larger than themselves, and that helped them to start to heal. After creating testimonials through writing and photography, students imagined what a school de confianza, a school of trust, might look like. They used their own stories and identities to illustrate a more just and supportive school environment in their drawings and ideas. Teachers believed in their potential, encouraged them to take challenging classes, and brought in authors and leaders from their own communities. As teachers and colleagues write, students' visions of schools de confianza included very practical suggestions for building a caring and inclusive school culture, such as encouraging teachers to inquire about students' well-being. Students shared these themes, along with their personal stories, during a series of 3 structured dialogue sessions with school leaders, district staff, and teachers. The adults listened with care and enthusiasm as they responded by taking real and practical action. Some of these actions including inviting students to take part in professional development, asking for student input when designing new roles for adults in the district, creating more chances for student representation and decision-making, and hiring more bilingual and BIPOC mental health counselors. Educators mentioned that while they often see data about students' sense of belonging or well-being, hearing the testimonials made those numbers come alive. Students' stories, along with their ideas for change, gave concrete suggestions for how to improve school practices. This response from the school shows the power of testimonial as a driver for real change at the level of a system. It helped the school move towards becoming a place where students and families felt truly supported and where the curriculum connects more deeply to students' lived experiences. The third initiative that I want to talk about is called Compassion and Dignity for Educators. It's based on a simple but important idea. The people who care for students and their families need care and support themselves. Crown Institute Director Sona Demijan saw this early on through conversations with teachers who were feeling overwhelmed and burned out. She's recognized the need for an initiative that would focus on educator well-being. Building on and expanding from earlier programs designed to support educator well-being, this initiative was created to help teachers cultivate compassion for themselves and others and in their schools, and to bring more joy into their daily work and relationships. Our team has developed and led a number of programs as part of the initiative. A key one that I'll talk about now is an online certificate program that's part of a master's degree in teacher leadership offered at the University of Colorado Boulder. I've been a part of this program as a co-designer and a teacher within it. And this slide shows our team members. In our certificate program, we teach compassion as an open-hearted, adaptive response to suffering. Drawing on insights from psychology and neuroscience, we provide a 4-part definition of compassion from that literature. It involves awareness of suffering, empathy, feeling concern for the connection, a desire to relieve suffering, and a willingness to take action to help. Compassion includes empathy, but it goes further. It moves us from just feeling concerned to setting an intention to support someone's well-being and taking and committing to action when we can. We teach in this course that compassion requires critical awareness of what causes suffering, not just individual pain, but what we call social suffering. This includes harm that comes from broader forces like racism, poverty, exclusion, that shape people's lived experiences. To be aware of social suffering in schools is to learn about its manifestations for students, as well as skillful and compassionate responses to it. We teach also that compassion requires, I missed a slide. We also teach that compassion is something that we can grow with practice, just like we train our bodies through exercise. To do this, we teach a secular contemplative practice, many of which have roots in Buddhist traditions from Tibet and Southeast Asia. Compassion is a natural response to suffering, and we can grow it too by tuning into first where it's easy for us. We invite educators to start by noticing how they respond when somebody they care about is suffering. A friend, a family member, even a pet, usually a pet. Then we guide them into practicing self-compassion, which for many is the hardest part, but also the most helpful, they say. The practices don't stop there. Over time, we explore what it means to extend compassion to people we don't know well, to those we find challenging, to those who push our buttons, and eventually to all sentient beings. The idea is to gently notice where our compassion tends to stop and practice with extending it a little further. One of the teachers in our compassion certificate, Ben, got to ask His Holiness the Dalai Lama a question over Zoom as part of a special conversation between His Holiness and several educators from the US. Ben explained to His Holiness, "In moments of stillness, it's easy for me to remember my intentions, such as being patient with difficult students. But when it gets stressful, I often fall back to my old habits. How can I keep my intentions at the front of my mind, even when situations are difficult and I feel frustrated?" His Holiness gave Ben something to think about that he said he turned over a lot in the coming months. Patience, His Holiness said, tolerance on the basis of compassion is most needed when we're passing through a difficult situation. When you're relaxed and face no challenge, when, as the Tibetan saying goes, the sun is shining and your belly is full, there's no immediate need of compassion or patience. Compassion and patience are really needed when you're facing a problem, just like you need medicine when you are afflicted with an illness. Similarly, when we are passing through difficult, at that moment, compassion is not only relevant, but can also be powerful. Now, Ben interpreted His Holiness to be saying that the easy part of compassion is loving people who love us back. But the true test of compassion is offering it to those for whom it feels really hard for us to love. Here is where, in our program, the idea of dignity becomes central. We introduced the idea of dignity in our certificate program through the writings of Manuel Espinosa and colleagues, who emphasize the way dignity is both inhering in persons, but is also contingent. Contingent on the ways that we treat one another, recognize and cultivate one another's potential. Or in the language I've been presenting here, contingent aspects of dignity refer to how we contribute to one another's flourishing. We support educators in developing a felt sense of common humanity as the basis for developing skill and conferring dignity to all students and their families in the face of social suffering. Common humanity, as we present and practice it within this project, is rooted in the idea that by virtue of our inherent dignity and by virtue of being human beings who all wish to be happy, we all deserve that treatment. We don't present the idea of common humanity in a way that negates or erases the diversity and richness of our life trajectories. Rather, we teach, as Larry Yang writes, the idea that through seeing the deep nature of our differences and how they are part of ourselves, we can see the deep similarities of our human experience. We all feel different at some point in our lives, and in that experience of difference is a similarity common to us all. We also teach that the basis for moving compassion outward to include those whom we barely know but see every day, as well as those who push our buttons, is to appreciate our fundamental interdependence with all others and with the earth. This idea is expressed by the Vietnamese monk Thich Nhat Hanh through the notion of interbeing. We inter-are, he writes, with one another and with all of life. And then we turn outward further to schools. In the capstone school course of our program, we work with school-based teams of educators who have gone through the first part of our course to help them create plans to make their schools more compassionate and dignity-affirming places where everyone can thrive. We support teachers in seeing themselves as leaders, capable of recognizing the social suffering that exists in their schools. We help them identify who can work with them to change the policies, practices, and routines that contribute to that suffering. And to guide that work, we use a framework called compassion organizing, which comes from organizational studies. It helps leaders respond to suffering in ways that are timely, caring, and responsive to the actual needs of those affected, while also creating environments that affirm everyone's dignity. We also stress that compassion organizing means looking closely at how harm is experienced unequally, especially by those most marginalized. To do this, we introduce a practice called actor network mapping, developed in a different research practice partnership called Access, to look at how key policies, practices, and routines are connected or work towards or against their goals. The capstone projects educators take on in our course vary deeply and widely, depending on their roles, schools, and what they care most about. Take Nikki, for example. She joined our course as an assistant principal of an urban elementary school wearing many hats: operations manager, instructional coach, and family engagement lead. She was the only one from our school in the course, which happens sometimes. Nikki lives in the same neighborhood where her students do, and she's deeply committed to making her school where newcomer families felt a true sense of belonging. For her capstone, she focused on connecting families to the resources that they need to thrive. She set a powerful intention: may our newcomer families be free from suffering due to inequitable access to community resources, support, and understanding. To bring this vision to life, Nikki and her team secured grant funding to redesign programs and to strengthen partnerships. They created open office hours in the school library with grant-funded computers and started a 10-week nutrition and wellness course for families, and launched a community garden where families earn stipends for helping tend the space. They're now working towards a permanent community hub that would include food and clothing pantry, monthly farmers markets, and family workshops. Nikki's also been tracking how students are experiencing the school using a regular district survey. And over the past 2 years, there have been small but meaningful improvements. Now, 95% of the families say they feel involved in the school, their voices are heard, and that their opinions are valued. We can't say for sure that Nikki's specific capstone efforts were the direct cause, but the data suggests the school is becoming the kind of place that she envisioned, one where families feel seen, heard, and included. For Nikki personally, the experience of being in the program has been, as she puts it, life-changing. She told us that it changed the way that I see myself, my peers, my city, the greater world. Adding this perspective has been a welcome change. For Nikki and other educators in this project, this kind of inside-out approach to school change has helped to bring to life the idea of flourishing, not just as a goal, but as something educators and families can experience and build together. Now, the initiatives I've shared today didn't come from a single researcher or even a small research team working alone. It came to life through deep partnerships with educators, students, and families. The Lyric program, for example, wouldn't exist without the high school that welcomed it in, or the district that made it possible for students to earn course credit for what they're learning there. The Belonging and Trust initiative was shaped by the stories families shared and by the powerful contributions of young people themselves who served as co-designers to the team. The Compassion and Dignity capstone course educator partners helped design that from the ground up in a process of coming together in community to choose practices and readings and design activities that could help resource teachers in difficult times. The research here has been fully integrated into program design as well. It's not something that's done to students, families, or educators. It's done with them and alongside them. Partnerships provide a context not just for building individual programs and conducting research. They are also contexts for supporting young people's development and growth as people and for building new forms of systems that are grounded in anukampa, that is, in care and compassionate action that is attuned to people's distinct circumstances and contexts. I want to name some of the partnership level work to create these initiatives to highlight what I see as the building blocks for building systems that support collective flourishing. I want to emphasize that this work is slow, uncertain, and often invisible, but essential if we are to reimagine educational systems for flourishing. The Compassion and Dignity Initiative has sought to embody the principle that partnerships should support participants in their own flourishing. My former student, Robin Reedy, has written about this key aspect of partnerships as supporting what she calls dignity-affirming care and interactions. Two key aspects of dignity-affirming care in partnerships are care in the present and care for the future. Caring in the present here means really seeing and listening to your partners, not just as gatekeepers or as in their roles, but as people with their own stories, needs, and contexts. It's about treating them with kindness and making sure they feel heard and valued. Caring for the future means supporting both their partners' long-term, short-term goals and long-term hopes. It's about helping partners grow into new roles and build the skills to reach their dreams. We saw care in the present come to life during the co-design of the Compassion and Dignity Certificate Program with educators during the COVID-19 pandemic. It was a tough time to be teaching, so we partnered closely with teachers, counselors, and middle school principal to make sure the process supported their real needs. We shifted how we worked, making space for open conversations about the challenges they were facing and exploring how compassion practices could help them care for themselves and others. Educators told us they really valued this approach. Many even brought the practices into their personal lives, using them to strengthen relationships with friends and family. So in a time of deep stress, co-design actually became a space where educators felt supported and connected, and where they could see how compassion might ease some of the suffering in their schools and their own lives. We've also supported in this program educators taking on new roles within our project. Nikki, for example, has been involved in creating a new offering in our initiative for teachers, helping them to structure and hold critical, compassionate conversations with colleagues over issues in their schools. She's shifted from participant to co-designer and is helping us expand who we are as an initiative. These initiatives also begin with the premise that within partnerships, caring requires attending to both history and power. We can't expect that participants in co-design and partnership will come with trust in institutions who are at the table, and there are good reasons to think they won't. Although in partnerships, we might want to approach our work as if we are all equals. We all carry different privileges, authorities, and ways of speaking and participating in spaces, and power within systems that shape how we engage in partnership work. Repair work is needed in most partnerships that are seeking transformation, as a solidarity rather than simple camaraderie may be necessary to build build relationships among partners whose interests cannot be expected to fully converge. The Belonging and Trust Project partnership began with these assumptions, knowing that families' own knowledge and experiences needed to serve as a basis for design. They brought experiences that intersect with larger historical patterns of movement, struggle, and liberation to the table, and invited in stories of desconfianza to acknowledge the ways that institutions exclude and marginalize them. In this way, the project helped build politicized trust, in which partners came, as Saper Vakil and colleagues of others have written, to be able to break bread and speak candidly about our professional and politicized goals, so as to discover together where we had a shared sense of solidarity and shared interests in how we could work together. Another practice that's evident in these partnerships and that I've written about elsewhere is infrastructuring. Infrastructuring refers to the purposeful efforts to change infrastructures in systems to become more equitable and to promote a more just distribution of meaningful opportunities to learn. An example here of infrastructuring comes from the Lyropeutics program. The leaders worked within the school system using existing schedules and course credit processes to make sure students could earn credit for participating. This helped make Lyropeutics a recognized part of the curriculum, not just an add-on. And in doing so, they turned a corner of a large public school into a space that felt culturally sustaining and welcoming for young people. It also gave students a clear path towards graduation. And in Now, in the United States, but also in many parts of the world, we are in a time when many of our infrastructures, like these I just talked about, are either under threat and have been destroyed. You may wonder if the programs I've described could even exist where you are. The kind of infrastructuring work of research-practice partnerships that's going to be required in the coming months and years is likely to be more of the kind where we are imagining anew what we could be. We will need to do what we can to ensure the safety of the people who are vulnerable. We will need to rely on one another for ideas and inspiration and for imagining futures that have not been before. Local partnerships are key in that work, and they involve both the relational work and infrastructure building that have made the therapeutics, the Belonging and Trust, and Compassion and Dignity initiatives a source of hope and healing for young people, their families, and educators. I want to leave with the suggestion that we need educational systems that look very different from the ones that we have today if we were to support our collective flourishing. I don't, however, think that that means that we have to accept the premise that the kind of destruction that is happening right now will lead us to a better system. It will not. Rather than the impulse to destroy, what is needed is the impulse to repair and renew. As media scholar Stephen Jackson writes about repair of systems, it takes place in between an almost always falling apart world and a world in a constant process of fixing and reinvention. Repair, moreover, is accomplished through complex, subtle acts of care. Finally, in a time when I know many of us are focused on our own survival and ensuring the safety and well-being of the youth, families, communities, and educators with whom we are partnered, it is important to remember purpose. It is a time to give ourselves the freedom to imagine a world where we can all flourish and where education prepares us for flourishing as a lifelong, life-wide, and life-deep endeavor. We need to step into whatever purpose is that motivates and sustains us in this moment to find out how we can contribute to our collective flourishing. I close with two quotations from the Parable series penned by author Octavia E. Butler, a visionary science fiction writer who used speculative storytelling to explore themes of power, resilience, and change, and who attempted to warn us against the forces and patterns in our societies that unfortunately help us understand the very times we are in today. She wrote about how to hold simultaneously the need to do what it takes to survive as well as to dream. She wrote, "That's all anybody can do right now. Live, hold out, survive. I don't know whether good times are coming back again, but I know it won't matter if we don't survive these times." She also wrote, "Purpose unifies us. It focuses our dreams, guides our plans, strengthens our efforts. Purpose defines us, shapes us, and offers us greatness." Thank you. Thank you. How are we doing questions? I think people coming up to the mic? Yeah. Oh, it wasn't part of the thing. Okay, great. Is there time for one or two? Great. People can come to the mic for accessibility purposes. We'll take a couple if there are. Yeah.
Hi, thank you for a very inspiring talk, and I feel really motivated. I think we are definitely in a very challenging times, and we see the divisions and the conflict and anxiety and worries. I think there are two ways to approach this kind of a system, how to say, the partnership. One is bottoms up, another one is top down. Question is, for us, we're not on the top.
Yeah.
How can we change the system? Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. We change it relationships one at a time. Our gift is the care that we have to offer, and also the precious gift of kind attention to one another. That's not the same as the material resources we need to build systems, but it is a material resource, and it's the most important one that we have right now, is to build with each other and to carry the relationships forward. They have not been destroyed. We need to hold on to them and make them stronger.